A struggling single father, down to his last few dollars, offers to help an elderly woman carry her heavy groceries across a snowy parking lot, never knowing that this small act of kindness would change his life forever. She vanishes without a word, but days later, he's called into an office he never imagined he'd enter. What he discovers leaves him speechless. This isn't just a story about groceries. It's about heart, second chances, and the quiet ways the universe rewards us when we least expect it. Stay with us, because what happens next will restore your faith in kindness. Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from? The wind howled outside like a wounded animal, rattling the loose window panes of the small, dimly lit apartment. Inside, the air was cold enough to see your breath, the heater clunking helplessly in the corner like it had given up halfway through the fight. Noah stood by the stove, wearing 2 flannel shirts layered over a long-sleeve thermal. He stirred a dented pot of instant oatmeal, watching it bubble and thicken under the dim yellow light, as if willing it to taste like something more than desperation. Behind him, Lily sat at their rickety kitchen table, swinging her legs in pink pajama pants, her nose slightly red from the chill. She held a crayon in one hand, a drawing forming on the back of an old envelope. "Can I put extra cinnamon in mine today, Daddy?" she asked, not looking up. Noah hesitated. The cinnamon jar was nearly empty. He'd been stretching it for weeks, shaking it carefully like it was gold dust, but he smiled anyway. "Of course, kiddo, only the finest for my little princess." He sprinkled the last of it across her bowl when it was ready, then scraped what was left into his own, just enough to keep the hunger from roaring. The microwave clock blinked 6:17 a.m. Another sleepless night, another shift survived. His back still ached from unloading pallets at the warehouse, and his hands were cracked from the cold, even through gloves. The paycheck wouldn't come for 3 more days, and the envelope under the fruit bowl, where he kept rent notices, had thickened. Noah sat across from Lily, watching her blow on her oatmeal. She grinned at him with missing front teeth. "You're tired, huh?" He managed to smile. "Just a little." Lily reached across the table and took his hand, her tiny fingers like ice wrapped in trust. "Don't worry, I'll take care of you when I'm big." Something in his chest twisted at that. He looked away, blinking fast. He was supposed to be the one taking care of her, not the other way around. Outside, the sky was still dark, the snow falling in lazy spirals. It had been a long winter, and for Noah, it felt like it might never end. The fridge opened with a soft hiss, casting a pale light into the shadowy kitchen. Noah stood in front of it, one hand gripping the door, the other resting on the edge of the counter like it was holding him up. Inside, the shelves were nearly bare. A half carton of eggs, 1 bruised apple, an almost empty jar of peanut butter with a spoon stuck in it, and a lone slice of cheese, still wrapped in its plastic like it was waiting for better company. He closed the door slowly, the light disappearing like a secret. His stomach growled, but he ignored it. Behind him, Lily was humming in the living room, cross-legged on the carpet with her dolls. Her backpack leaned against the front door, the zipper straining from the weight of old books and worn folders. A piece of paper stuck out from one of them, her school lunch menu for the week. She popped her head around the corner. "Daddy, what's for snack night?" Noah froze for a beat. Then he forced a smile. "Tonight's a surprise," he said, reaching for a can of beans from the cupboard and hiding it behind his back like it was contraband. Lily grinned, spinning back into the room. "I hope it's the little pizza bagels again." Noah didn't answer. The bagels had been a hit last time, but they were $5 he didn't have now. He looked at the red envelope still taped to the inside of the door. Final notice. The landlord had slid it under again, this time with a note scribbled in the margin. "If rent's not paid by Friday, we have to talk." He rubbed the back of his neck, the pressure building behind his eyes. Friday, 2 days. And his paycheck wouldn't hit until Monday. He checked his bank app again anyway. Habit, maybe hope. But the screen stared back at him with the same numbers: negative balance, overdraft pending. The knock on the door made him jump. He peeked through the peephole, just a flyer slipping off the door handle in the wind. 50% off groceries. Today only. He grabbed it, scanned the fine print. Too far. No car. No good. Noah sat down at the table, elbows on the wood, head in his hands. Across the room, Lily laughed at something one of her dolls said. Innocent, unworried. He looked at her, then back at the fridge. Tonight he'd make something out of nothing. Again. Because that's what you do when you're a dad, even when there's nothing left to give. The fluorescent lights of the supermarket flickered above like tired eyes, buzzing faintly over the aisles. Noah pushed the cart with one hand, the wheels squeaking with every turn. In the child seat, Lily swung her legs and held a cereal box to her chest, the kind with the cartoon penguin she liked. He didn't have the heart to take it from her. Not yet. They moved slowly through the aisles, his other hand clutching a wrinkled envelope of coupons. He'd spent half the night circling deals from the weekly ad, calculating totals like a man defusing a bomb. Now, every choice was a battle. Store-brand macaroni or rice, generic canned soup, or a dented box of crackers from the discount shelf. The difference between eating and skipping dinner tomorrow was sometimes just a dime. At the produce section, Lily's face lit up. Can we get apples? The red kind, the crunchy ones? She was already reaching for the bag. Noah hesitated. The apples were $2.99 a pound. The bananas were on sale for 49 cents. He looked at the price, then back at her. She was smiling, wide-eyed and hopeful. Tell you what, he said, crouching beside her. Bananas are superhero food. They've got potassium. You know what that does? She blinked. What? Makes you strong, like can lift a car strong. Her eyes widened. Really? Cross my heart. She giggled and nodded. Okay, I want bananas then. He breathed a quiet sigh of relief, grabbing a small bunch that wouldn't tip the scale past what he could afford. Back in the cart they went, replacing her apples. She didn't notice. He was thankful. At checkout, he handed over the coupons one by one, watching the numbers on the screen tick down slowly. The cashier gave him a look, somewhere between pity and impatience, but didn't say anything. Total $28.47. He slid his debit card and prayed. It went through. Barely. Outside, the cold hit him like a slap. He zipped Lily's coat up to her chin and hoisted the bags into the cart. His breath rose in white clouds as he stared at the receipt. Nothing extra, nothing wasted, just enough. And even that felt like a miracle. The wind came fast, curling around the corner of the supermarket like it had a mind of its own. It howled across the parking lot, sharp and biting, lifting snow into little whirlwinds that danced between rows of cars. Noah squinted against it, one arm shielding Lily's face as they stepped off the curb. She clutched her cereal box like it was treasure, her nose buried in her scarf. "Stay close to me, all right," he said, tightening his grip on the shopping bags. The plastic handles were cutting into his fingers. His knuckles burned in the cold. They were almost to the car when it happened. A loud crash, the rattle of metal on pavement. Across the lot, an older woman was crouched beside her toppled cart. A gust of wind had knocked it sideways, spilling cans and produce in all directions. An egg carton lay cracked open on the concrete, yolk bleeding through the snow like it was something living. Noah didn't think. He turned to Lily. "Stay by the car. Don't move." He jogged over, slipping a little on a patch of black ice, then crouched beside the woman, who was already fumbling to gather her things. Her hands shook, not just from the cold but something else. Embarrassment maybe, or fear. "Hey, it's okay. Let me help," Noah said, already picking up cans and slipping them into her reusable bags. One of them was torn where a box of pasta had sliced through the seam. The woman looked up, startled. "You don't have to." "I know," he said gently, "but you shouldn't be out here alone in this weather." She blinked, lips slightly parted. Her gray hair had come loose from her scarf, strands sticking to her cheeks. Most people don't stop. Noah didn't respond to that. He just kept collecting items, careful not to break any more of the already damaged eggs. He repacked her bags as best he could, then took 2 in each hand. "Where's your car?" She pointed to a silver sedan parked a few rows down. Noah walked beside her in silence, the wind whistling around them. He placed the bags gently in her trunk, then turned to go. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "You didn't even ask my name." He smiled faintly. Didn't need to. He walked back to Lily, who stood patiently by their car, cheeks flushed red. Noah didn't know it yet, but that single act of kindness had just changed everything. She stood by the open trunk, the edge of her coat flapping in the wind like a flag from another time. The silver sedan looked clean, well-maintained, and completely out of place in the cracked, slushy lot. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at the groceries, as Noah packed them in, carefully, checking each bag like he was handling someone else's valuables. When the last one was in, he gave the cart a little push so it wouldn't roll away, then nodded at her, ready to head back toward Lily. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm, but edged with something that lingered. He glanced back and offered a small smile. Wasn't a big deal. Her eyes stayed on him, steady and unreadable. "It is to me." He shrugged, just doing what anyone should. But she tilted her head, the faintest furrow in her brow. You'd be surprised how few people think like that. Noah didn't answer. He didn't know what to say to that. He shoved his hands into his coat pockets, half because of the cold, half because it was easier than holding her gaze. She reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet, thumbing through the bills inside. "Please, let me give you something, for your time." "No," he said quickly, maybe too quickly. His voice was firm, final. It's really fine." That made her pause. Slowly, she tucked the wallet back in. Her fingers lingered on the flap, then dropped to her side. For a moment, there was just the wind and the sound of cars passing on the main road nearby. "You didn't ask for anything," she said softly. Noah offered a faint smile. "Didn't really feel like the right time." "You don't even know my name?" He laughed a little under his breath. "Nope, don't need that either." She studied him, almost like she was committing something to memory. Then she reached out and gently rested a gloved hand on his arm, just for a second, a fleeting connection before she stepped back. "Well," she said quietly, "thank you, stranger." And then she got into her car. No lingering goodbye, no fuss. The engine purred to life, and within seconds she was backing out of the space and gliding toward the exit. No wave, no glance in the mirror, just gone. Noah stood there for a moment, squinting into the distance, snowflakes collecting in his beard. Something about the whole thing didn't sit right, not in a bad way, just strange. Like he'd missed a step in a conversation he didn't know he was having. He turned and walked back to Lily, who was sitting cross-legged in the back seat, swinging her feet. "Who was that lady?" she asked. He closed the door and started the engine, rubbing his hands to get the feeling back. Just someone who needed a little help. Lily grinned. "You help a lot of people." Noah pulled onto the road, watching the taillights ahead disappear into the snowy mist. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Maybe." Noah buckled Lily into her seat, tugging the strap snug across her little coat. She was humming some tune from a cartoon she liked, oblivious to the cold creeping in through the cracked door seals. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, trying not to show the fatigue tugging at his bones. The bags were in, the cereal was safe, and for once she looked content. "You warm enough, Bug?" She nodded and pulled the scarf up to her chin. "I'm okay. That lady was nice." Noah gave a faint smile. Yeah, she was. He shut the back door and turned to glance over his shoulder, half expecting to see her still at her trunk, maybe adjusting her bags or starting her car. But the parking space where she had stood just moments ago was empty. He blinked. The silver sedan was gone. No engine rev, no brake lights, no sound of tires crunching over ice, just Gone. The cart was gone too. Even the cracked egg carton that had spilled on the pavement was nowhere in sight. No wet smudge, no shell fragments. The wind howled through the lot again, kicking snow up into tiny funnels. A crow landed on a lamppost and stared down at him like it knew something he didn't. Noah scanned the surrounding rows of cars. Nothing. Not a glint of silver. Not a trace of movement. The whole lot felt eerily still now, like time had stuttered and skipped a beat. He rubbed his face, suddenly unsure if the conversation had even happened. Maybe the cold was getting to him. Maybe the sleepless nights and stress had finally started playing tricks. But no, he remembered her hand on his arm, the look in her eyes, the way she'd said, "You didn't even ask for my name." It had been real. He stood there for a moment longer, watching the fog roll off the asphalt like breath. Then he climbed into the driver's seat, still unsettled, still searching the mirrors as he pulled away. But the woman was gone. Not just out of sight, gone, like she'd vanished into thin air. It was just after 6 p.m., and the apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast and canned soup. Noah sat at the kitchen table, still in his work boots, one hand cradling his forehead, while the other scrolled through job listings on his cracked phone screen. His warehouse shift had been brutal, short-staffed, longer hours, and still not enough on the paycheck to cover the looming utility bill. Lily was sprawled on the couch in the next room, coloring quietly with her markers. The TV played an old animated movie on low volume. Outside, snow fell in thick, lazy clumps, muffling the world like a blanket too heavy to move under. The phone buzzed in his hand. Unknown number. He stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over decline. Scam, probably. Or collections. But something made him answer. "Hello?" A pause, then a woman's voice, calm and professional. "Is this Mr. Noah West?" His back straightened slightly. "Speaking. My name is Dana. I'm calling on behalf of Benton Holdings. Our executive team would like to schedule a meeting with you." Noah blinked, sitting up straighter. "I think you've got the wrong number." "No, Mr. West," she said evenly. "We don't." He swallowed, glancing toward the window like maybe someone was watching from the street. "What is this about?" "I can't disclose details over the phone, but I assure you this is a legitimate inquiry. Our CEO, Miss Benton, asked for you by name. She was very specific." Noah felt something tighten in his chest. The name pinged somewhere in his memory. Benton Holdings, grocery, real estate, corporate titan stuff. The kind of name that made headlines in business magazines he didn't read. "I don't know anyone named Benton," he said carefully. Dana hesitated, then added, "She said you helped her recently, at a grocery store." His mouth went dry. The woman. The one from the parking lot. Noah rubbed his jaw, eyes narrowing. "This a joke?" "No, sir. If you're available, we'd like to meet with you tomorrow. 10 a.m., I'll text the address." He didn't answer right away. His mind was sprinting in circles. He looked over at Lily, still lost in her coloring, and then back to the phone. "Okay," he said finally. "I'll be there." "Excellent. We'll see you then." The call ended. Noah sat frozen, the hum of the fridge suddenly deafening. He set the phone down, staring at it like it might ring again. Who was she, and why the hell did a billionaire want to meet him? Noah had never driven this far north of the city before. The snow-covered streets slowly gave way to wide boulevards lined with sharp-glass buildings that shimmered like ice under the morning sun. His old sedan groaned in protest as it climbed the final hill, the engine rattling just loud enough to make him nervous. When he reached the top, he pulled into the visitor lot and killed the engine, letting the silence settle around him. He stared through the windshield. It was taller than anything he'd ever stood in front of. 40 floors of mirrored windows and clean steel trim, the Benton Holdings logo carved in brushed metal above the glass doors. Sleek, intimidating. It didn't belong in the same world as food stamps, overtime shifts, and hand-me-downs that didn't quite fit. Noah sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, his breath visible in the air. He could see people moving inside, suits, coats, high heels that clicked against polished floors. The kind of people who didn't wait for buses or scan every item at checkout, praying they hadn't miscounted their money. He wiped his palms against his jeans and stepped out. The lobby doors opened with a smooth hiss. Warm air rushed out, smelling faintly of citrus and money. Marble floors, gold accents, a reception desk as wide as his entire apartment. His boots squeaked as he walked in, drawing glances from two sharply dressed women near the elevator. "May I help you, sir?" the receptionist asked, not unkindly, but with the kind of tone that expected an apology. I'm here to see someone. Dana from—" he hesitated. "Benton Holdings." The woman typed something into her tablet, then smiled. "Of course, Mr. West. She's expecting you." Elevator to the 39th floor. The doors closed around him, and he watched the numbers tick upward faster than his thoughts could catch up. His reflection in the mirror-lined walls looked like a ghost of someone who didn't belong here. Old coat, calloused hands, faded flannel. When the elevator opened, the view stunned him. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the city, endless glass and sky. A woman in a tailored suit greeted him with a smile. "Noah West?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, trying not to sound as uncertain as he felt. "Right this way." And just like that, he stepped into a world he had never imagined would open its doors for someone like him. The conference room was the kind of place you only saw in movies, where decisions worth millions were made with the flick of a pen. The table was long and gleaming, dark wood polished to a mirror sheen. Chrome fixtures hung from the ceiling in geometric shapes, casting soft light that reflected off the table's glossy surface. Noah could see his own face in it, tired, weathered, underslept, and it only made the feeling in his gut worse. He sat in one of the oversized leather chairs, stiff and uncertain, his coat folded awkwardly over his lap. His boots left faint, wet marks on the slate floor. His hands, still chapped from cold and labor, rested on his knees like they didn't know where else to go. Across from him, a tray of refreshments sat untouched. Silver carafes of coffee, tiny tongs for sugar cubes, crystal glasses of water with lemon slices floating inside like decoration. It all felt too curated, too clean, like if he reached for anything, an alarm might go off. The ticking of the wall clock echoed too loudly in the silence. Noah shifted in his chair, glancing around the room, trying to find something familiar. A photo, a smudge on the wall, anything that would make this feel less like a mistake. But there was nothing, just cold perfection. The door opened behind him, and he jerked slightly, straightening his posture without thinking. A woman in a dark blazer walked in, tablet in hand, and gave him a polite nod without slowing her pace. She placed the tablet at the head of the table, glanced over the settings like a conductor preparing for an orchestra, then stepped out again without a word. Noah swallowed. He rubbed the back of his neck and looked down at his clothes, flannel shirt, jeans, a jacket he'd patched last winter. He was a man who fixed broken things with duct tape and grit. And here he was, in a room built for people who never had to. He checked the time again, 2 minutes past 10. He wasn't sure who he was waiting for, but deep down, he already knew. And it scared him more than anything had in years. The door opened with a quiet click, and Noah looked up. She entered, like the room already belonged to her, which, in a way, it did. Gone was the bundled-up woman with the wind-blown hair and cracked egg carton. The Eleanor that stepped into the conference room now was composed, deliberate. Her heels made no sound on the slate floor, her navy suit crisp and tailored, her movements smooth and confident. She looked younger somehow, not in age, but in certainty, in control. Every part of her carried weight. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she walked to the head of the table, picked up the tablet the assistant had left behind, tapped something into it, then looked up at Noah as if she had just stepped out of a different world entirely. Because she had. "Mr. West," she said, her voice clear and warm but unmistakably firm. "I'm glad you came." Noah blinked, trying to match her now with the woman who had fumbled for groceries in a freezing parking lot. He stood halfway, unsure if that was the right thing to do, then sat back down just as quickly. His palms were sweaty. He wiped them on his jeans. I didn't know it was you." Eleanor smiled, just slightly. "Most people don't. That's part of the point." She finally took her seat at the table across from him, folding her hands neatly. She studied him, not in a condescending way, but like someone who took stock of details and remembered all of them. "You probably have a lot of questions," she said. "Yeah?" Noah breathed. "Starting with why the CEO of—" He hesitated, gesturing vaguely around him. "This place would want anything to do with a guy who fixes pallets and counts coupons." Eleanor didn't look away. "Because you helped me when you didn't know who I was. Because you didn't ask for anything. Because when most people look at someone struggling, they look through them. But you didn't." Noah shifted in his chair, uncomfortable under the compliment. "I didn't do anything special?" "That's exactly what makes it special." Her gaze softened for a moment, but only just. "And now, Mr. West, I'd like to return the favor, if you'll let me." The hum of the building's ventilation system filled the silence that followed, but in Noah's chest, his heartbeat drowned out everything else. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, folding her hands in her lap with a kind of quiet grace that seemed earned, not performed. The softness in her expression didn't dull the sharpness in her eyes. She was the kind of woman who had walked through boardrooms where no one wanted her to speak and left with the final word. Noah could feel that in the way she sat, the way she breathed, like silence belonged to her. "I go out every year," she said after a long pause. "Different stores, different cities, dressed down, no driver, no entourage. I pick a location, put on an old coat, and see who notices me." Noah tilted his head. "Why?" "Because I run a company that serves millions of people who live paycheck to paycheck," she said, her voice steady. "People who don't have time for perfect packaging or expensive branding. People like you, like me, once." She paused, then smiled faintly. "I need to remember what it feels like to be overlooked." Noah let that sit in the air. He wasn't sure what to say. The image of her in the parking lot, bent over spilled groceries, fumbling with eggs and wind, clashed violently with the woman seated in front of him now. "That day in the lot," she continued, 10 people passed me. Some looked. Most didn't. One man walked around my groceries like they were trash." She tapped her fingers lightly on the armrest. "Only one person stopped." Noah swallowed. "I didn't do anything big." "You didn't ask if I had money. You didn't rush. You didn't hesitate. You just helped. That kind of kindness, it's rare, Mr. West. And it's why you're sitting here." He shifted in his seat, glancing at the water glass in front of him, the lemon slice now floating like a lifeboat. "I wasn't trying to impress anyone." "I know," she said. "That's what impressed me." He looked up and met her gaze. There was no grand speech, no music swelling in the background, just two people in a room too quiet for what was being said. She smiled again, softer this time. "You helped me when I was invisible. And now I'd like to see what happens when you're not." Noah sat back, the words still hanging in the air like smoke after a fire. He blinked slowly, trying to make sure he'd heard her right. A leadership program? Him? Eleanor watched him carefully, her tone measured, but not cold. "I'm not offering charity, Mr. West. I'm offering an opportunity, one that I believe you've earned." He let out a small, disbelieving breath, more of a laugh than anything else, and rubbed the back of his neck. "Ma'am, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There hasn't," she said calmly. "I stock trucks," he continued, shaking his head. "I lift boxes, fix pallets when they break. I'm not—" He paused, gesturing around the gleaming room. "This. I don't belong in suits or meetings or programs." She leaned forward slightly, her voice soft but firm. "That's exactly why I chose you." Noah stared at her, speechless. "We've built this company around efficiency, around margins, logistics, data," she said. "And we've gotten very good at it. But somewhere along the way we started forgetting about heart, about real people. about the ones our policies impact the most. We need voices in this company that aren't polished, that haven't been trained to say the perfect thing in boardrooms. He looked down at his hands, rough and scarred from years of work. They didn't look like hands that belonged in leadership. "I've got a kid," he said finally, quietly. "A daughter, Lily. I work nights to keep the lights on. I can't afford to play dress-up in some corporate fantasy." "This isn't fantasy," Eleanor replied. "This is real, and if you say yes, we'll work around your hours. There's a stipend during training, transportation if you need it. We'll make it work." He felt the room spin slightly. His body was still in the chair, but his mind was somewhere else, picturing Lily, drawing pictures of apples and stars on the kitchen table, her tiny voice saying, "You're tired, huh?" And the way it broke something inside him. "Why me?" he asked again, more to himself than to her. Eleanor smiled. "Because you already lead, Noah. You just don't see it yet." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not yet. Noah sat on the edge of his bed that night, the glow from the hallway casting a thin stripe of light across the worn carpet. His work boots were still on, laces untied, mud drying at the seams. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional rustle of the wind pushing against the window pane. Lily was asleep in the next room, curled beneath a blanket dotted with cartoon stars, her small hand wrapped around a stuffed animal with one eye missing. He'd kissed her forehead an hour ago, told her there might be changes coming, that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. She'd smiled and whispered, "Good. I want you to smile more, Daddy." But now, sitting here in the silence, Noah didn't feel like smiling. He stared at the man in the cracked mirror on the closet door, calloused hands. A flannel shirt that had been washed too many times, eyes that looked older than they should. This was the man who spent nights hauling crates under flickering warehouse lights, who counted coins at checkout lines, who knew how to fix a busted liftgate but didn't know what a profit margin looked like. Leadership? In that world? He felt like a fraud just thinking about it. The image of that conference room drifted back, shiny wood, designer suits, coffee in glass cups instead of styrofoam. They didn't know him. They didn't know what it meant to check the gas tank before saying yes to a second shift. They hadn't scraped mold off the edges of bread to make it stretch another day. He wasn't like them. He wasn't polished. He didn't have the words or the degrees or the confidence. He rubbed his face, exhausted. Maybe he should say no, walk away, go back to the warehouse and forget the whole thing. Maybe it was safer to stay in his world, one he understood, even if it was breaking him. But then he remembered the way Eleanor had looked at him, like he mattered, and that scared him even more. Because if he said yes, and failed, he'd have to face the one fear worse than staying small, proving them right. The morning light spilled through the blinds in thin golden stripes that stretched across the kitchen table. Noah sat there in silence, nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee, barely tasting it. His mind was still swimming in doubt, the weight of the previous day's offer pressing against his chest like it was trying to crush the air out of him. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, the polished conference room came back. The way his boots had squeaked on the floor, the way he'd stumbled over his words, the echo of his own voice in a room that didn't feel like it belonged to people like him. A small scuffle of socked feet pulled him from his thoughts. Lily appeared in the doorway, her hair a wild mess, dragging her favorite blanket behind her like a cape. She rubbed her eyes, then yawned, before walking straight to the counter and climbing onto a chair across from him. "Morning, Daddy," she mumbled. He smiled weakly. "Morning, bug." She reached into her little backpack, hanging by the door, and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper, her fingers smudged with marker ink. Without a word, she slid it across the table to him. "I made you something," she said, "for your new job." Noah unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, wobbly lines, bright colors, all the innocence in the world. There he was, standing behind a counter labeled Store. He had a big red superhero cape that stretched behind him like wings. A smiling customer stood nearby, holding groceries. Above the figure, in big blocky letters, she had written, "My daddy is the boss," and underneath it, a heart. Just one, lopsided, unmistakably hers. He stared at the picture, unable to speak. "Do you like it?" she asked, swinging her legs under the chair. Noah nodded slowly, swallowing hard. He blinked fast, but it didn't stop the tears from welling up. He looked at her, this tiny person who thought he could do anything, be anything. The kind of belief only a child could carry, unburdened by failure or fear. She believed in him, without question. He reached across the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her tighter than he meant to. "I love it, sweetheart," he whispered. "I love it so much." And for the first time in days, he let himself believe, just a little, that maybe he could be the man she saw in those crayon lines. The doors hissed open, and Noah stepped inside the store's main office, already feeling sweat prickle beneath his collar. His borrowed shirt, a button-down from a thrift shop rack, felt stiff around the shoulders. He tugged at the cuffs, trying to appear composed, but his fingers were trembling slightly. "Mr. West, right?" A young man with sharp glasses and a tighter smile extended a hand. "Chad, training coordinator. You'll be shadowing me this week." Noah shook his hand. "Right, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity." Chad was already turning away. "Let's see what you've got." The next few hours blurred into chaos. Registers chirping, radios crackling, clipboard checklists that made no sense. Terms like SKU variants and time-sensitive markdowns were thrown around as if everyone had been born speaking retail fluently. Noah had worked physically harder before, but not like this. This wasn't about lifting. This was about knowing the dance. And he didn't. He tried to scan a damaged product into inventory. The screen beeped red. Wrong button, again. He tried to enter a time card into the staff management system. Locked out, twice. A teenage cashier leaned over and whispered, "It's okay. It took me like 3 weeks to learn this stuff," before walking away with a kind smile that somehow made it worse. Noah's cheeks burned. At lunch, he sat in the break room with a cup of coffee and no appetite. The others chatted about schedules and vacations and management rotations. No one spoke to him, not out of cruelty, just disinterest. He didn't know their world. He hadn't earned a seat at the table, yet. Later that afternoon, a call came over the intercom. Someone had dropped a case of tomato sauce in aisle 7. Chad looked over at Noah and smirked. Guess we're putting the new guy to good use. Noah didn't argue. He grabbed a mop and got to work, red paste soaking into his shoes. Customers passed by, pretending not to stare. He kept his eyes down, cleaning until the last smear was gone. By the end of the day, his feet ached and his pride felt bruised. This wasn't going to be easy. And deep down, a quiet voice whispered something he didn't want to hear. "Maybe you're not cut out for this after all." The training room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and cheap coffee. Noah stood near the back, clutching a clipboard that might as well have been a foreign object. His morning had already gone sideways. He'd accidentally sent a shift report to the wrong department, then mixed up labels on the floor plan. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to make him feel like a kid sitting in a college lecture with no textbook. The meeting hadn't started yet. A few assistant managers from nearby stores had wandered in, all in varying shades of corporate gray, sharp blazers, well-fitted pants, pressed collars that didn't wrinkle with every breath like his did. They stood in a loose circle near the front of the room, laughing quietly over coffee cups. Noah didn't know what was worse, their indifference or the fact that every now and then one of them glanced his way and whispered something behind a raised palm. Then Chad walked in. He was everything Noah wasn't. Tall, slick, not a wrinkle on him. His badge was gold-trimmed, his confidence louder than his voice. He clapped a guy on the shoulder, dropped his keys on the table, and spun a chair around before sitting in it backward, like he was hosting his own show. "All right, team," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Let's talk about what happens when the home office starts making unusual decisions." Laughter, light but knowing. Chad's eyes drifted toward Noah, casually, like it wasn't planned, but it was. "Word is," Chad continued, "we've got a new recruit from the warehouse floor, straight off the loading dock, a real Cinderella story." Noah looked up, unsure if he was supposed to laugh too. Chad smirked. "What's your name again?" "Noah." Right. You're the guy the old lady handpicked, huh?" He tapped the side of his coffee cup. "Must be nice. One good deed, and boom, suit and a badge." The others chuckled, not cruel, just enough to sting. Noah felt the heat crawl up the back of his neck. He looked down at the clipboard. No words came. Chad leaned back, stretching. "Don't worry. We'll get you up to speed, eventually." Noah didn't answer. He just nodded once, tight and small. Let them laugh. Because if he was going to prove he belonged here, he'd have to do it the only way he knew how, by staying quiet, and working harder than every last one of them. The smell hit him before he even opened the door fully. Chemical pine cleaner layered over something far less pleasant. The fluorescent lights in the men's restroom buzzed with a tired hum, flickering every few seconds like they weren't fully committed to doing their job. Noah stood in the doorway for a beat, sleeves rolled past his elbows, clipboard tucked under one arm, and a plunger in the other hand. He didn't have to be doing this. Not technically. This wasn't in the training manual. But the store's janitor had called out, and the clogged toilet in stall 3 was backing up fast. Everyone else conveniently vanished when the radio call came through. Noah stepped inside. His reflection in the mirror looked almost ironic. Dress shirt tucked into slacks that didn't quite fit, sweat beading on his forehead, tie loosened around his neck. He didn't look like a manager in training. He looked like a man cleaning up after people who would never learn his name. And that's exactly what he was. He didn't make a sound, didn't ask for help, just went to work. He scrubbed the sinks until the soap scum vanished, mopped the floors until the gray tiles reflected light, emptied trash bins with bare hands wrapped in paper towels because no one had restocked the gloves. Then, finally, he knelt beside the toilet that had sparked the problem and, without a word, plunged until the water receded and the mess disappeared like it had never existed. When he walked out 30 minutes later, he was damp, red-faced, and reeking faintly of bleach. Chad passed him in the hallway and raised an eyebrow. "You know we have people for that, right?" Noah just looked at him and shrugged. "Not today we don't," Chad scoffed, shaking his head. "Suit yourself, hero." Noah didn't answer. He headed straight for the back office, grabbed the schedule, and started reworking the afternoon shift after one of the cashiers called out sick. Let them think what they wanted. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to earn it, one mop bucket at a time. The store was unusually quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Snow was falling in slow, silent flurries outside, softening the world into something still and white. Inside, under the steady hum of the overhead lights, Noah stood near Register 4, crouched beside a young employee who looked on the verge of tears. Her name was Kara, barely 19. She had dropped a roll of quarters behind the till, typed the wrong code 3 times, and called the wrong manager on the intercom, each mistake stacking like bricks on her already slumping shoulders. Noah didn't raise his voice, didn't sigh, didn't let the stress of the floor leak into his expression. He just knelt beside her and gently walked her through the steps again, his tone low and calm. "Hey," he said, watching her wipe her eyes on her sleeve when she thought he wasn't looking. "You're doing okay, seriously." She shook her head. "I can't even figure out the returns menu. I'm messing everything up." "Everyone does at first," he replied. "I hit the panic button my first week and shut down a whole lane. True story." Kara let out a weak laugh. Noah smiled and tapped the screen. "It's just buttons and people. You'll get both with time." He stood up slowly, his knees cracking louder than he'd like to admit, then gave her space to breathe. He didn't notice the tall figure near the entrance until he turned around. Eleanor Benton stood just inside the glass doors. No assistant, no clipboard, just a long winter coat and a quiet gaze that felt like a searchlight. She hadn't announced her arrival. No calls, no emails, just appeared, as if materializing out of the snowfall. Their eyes met briefly. She didn't smile, didn't wave, just watched. She looked at the way Noah adjusted a display sign that had tilted sideways. How he patted Kara's shoulder once, gently, before moving on. How he spoke to customers with a kind of respect that didn't sound rehearsed, like it was built into him. Eleanor said nothing. She didn't have to. She turned and left without a word. But Noah felt it. Something had shifted, and somewhere deep inside, the smallest crack of belief in himself began to grow. The call came through just after 9:00 a.m., a surprise audit from Regional. Noah was restocking end cap displays when Chad burst into the stockroom, tie half loosened and voice already tense. "Suit up," he barked. "Audit team just pulled into the lot." Noah blinked. "Today?" "Yeah, genius, today. And guess who forgot to finalize last week's inventory reports?" Noah paused. "I submitted mine Tuesday." Chad scoffed, already walking away. "Then why does the system show a 30-unit surplus in dry goods? Get it fixed before they ask questions." By the time the auditors walked in, clipboards in hand, eyes sharp behind thick lenses, the store had shifted from casual hum to silent panic. Employees moved like shadows, avoiding eye contact, whispering instructions. Chad met the auditors with the enthusiasm of a politician and the sincerity of a car salesman. Noah stood at the back, jaw tight. He didn't know everything about audits, but he knew one thing. If numbers were off, heads rolled. And Chad had made it very clear who was going to be offered up as the first. "Mr. West," one of the auditors called out, flipping a page on his folder, "can you explain this discrepancy in aisle 12? Noah stepped forward, heart pounding. The spreadsheet showed a surplus of 28 boxes of a premium brand of organic cereal, an expensive product stored in limited quantity. "We don't carry that much of it," he said, squinting at the sheet. "That number's wrong," Chad cut in too quickly. "Actually, that was part of a special order last month. Noah logged it." Noah frowned. "No, I didn't. That shipment was rerouted. We only got half of what was expected." The auditor arched a brow. "You're sure? I double-checked the receiving log myself." The room went quiet. Chad tried to recover, but the auditor was already pulling up the warehouse records. Noah pointed to a line on the screen. "See that? 15 units received, not 40. That extra stock never came." The auditor nodded slowly, marking his clipboard. "You just saved this store from a major deduction." Chad said nothing. But Noah didn't gloat. He just nodded once, calm and steady. He wasn't here for the credit. He was here to do the job right, even when someone else hoped he'd fail. The call came just after lunch, when the store had finally settled into a quiet rhythm. Noah was helping unload a delayed shipment in the back when the assistant manager leaned into the loading bay. "Corporate's on the line. Miss Benton wants to see you." The words felt like ice dropped down the back of his shirt. Noah wiped his hands on a towel, heart thumping a little faster. He tried not to show it as he walked to the office. Tried not to wonder what this meant. Was this about the audit, about Chad, about him stepping in? By the time he entered the sleek, glass-paneled office on the top floor, his palms were damp again. The room looked exactly like he remembered, polished, silent, too clean to feel real. Eleanor was seated at her desk, looking out the window, fingers steepled beneath her chin. She didn't speak right away, just motioned to the chair across from her. Noah sat, spine stiff, hands resting on his knees like a student called into the principal's office. "You caught something yesterday," she said finally, turning to face him. "Something that could have cost us. Cost you a great deal." He nodded slowly. I knew the numbers didn't add up." She studied him, her gaze calm, unblinking. "Some would have looked the other way, let it play out, protected themselves." Noah shifted, unsure what to say. "You didn't," she continued. "You stepped in, even when it would have been easier not to. That matters to me." He met her eyes, then cautious. It wasn't about proving anything. It was just the right thing to do. Eleanor leaned back, a faint smile curving at the edge of her mouth. "Noah," she said softly, "you don't fix problems with power. You fix them with presence, with being there, with knowing when to speak and when to listen." He blinked, caught off guard by the weight of her words. People follow people they trust, and that's not something you can teach. It's something you either carry or you don't. She reached into a drawer and slid a small envelope across the desk toward him. "Starting next week, I want you to begin shadowing the general manager. Consider it the next step." Noah stared at the envelope, then up at her, and for the first time, he didn't feel like an outsider. He felt seen. Noah stood in front of the store's employee bulletin board, staring at the freshly pinned announcement like it had been written in a language he couldn't read. His name was there, black ink, bold font, no frills. Noah West, assistant manager, effective immediately. People passed by, clapping him on the back, offering half smiles and quick congratulations. A few even meant it. Kara gave him a hug that caught him off guard. "Chad?" Nowhere in sight. He said all the right things, nodded, shook hands. Thanked the store director. But his stomach was a knot. Not from nerves, just from everything catching up. All the nights without sleep, the shifts that blurred into each other, the weight of never knowing if he was enough. Now here it was, official, staring back at him in 12-point font. But it still didn't feel real. When the day ended, he didn't go out for drinks with the others, didn't pick up a cake or swing by a bar to celebrate. Instead, he drove straight to Lily's school, his name tag still clipped to his chest, the word assistant manager catching the fading light like it was trying to convince him too. He waited outside the building, hands in his pockets, until the last bell rang and the doors burst open. Children ran out in every direction, backpacks bouncing, laughter spilling into the cold air. Then he saw her. Lily spotted him from the top of the steps, and her face lit up instantly. She ran at full speed, boots thudding against the pavement, her puffy coat flapping like wings behind her. He barely had time to brace himself before she leapt into his arms. "You did it!" she squealed, her arms locking around his neck. "You did it, Daddy!" Noah froze, stunned by her words. "You're a manager now, right?" she asked, breathless. "Like a real one, with keys and everything?" He nodded slowly, something breaking open in his chest. He couldn't speak, just held her, tight. And in that moment, surrounded by snow and after-school chaos, he felt it for the first time. Not pride, not relief, but joy. Quiet, honest, unshakable joy. Because for once, he wasn't just surviving. He was building something. For her. The break room was empty except for the low hum of the soda machine and the ticking clock on the wall, its minute hand crawling past the end of another long shift. Noah was gathering the daily reports, sliding them neatly into the binder, when he heard the door creak open behind him. He didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Chad walked in with the slow, confident swagger of someone who still believed the room owed him something. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, a smirk already playing at the corner of his mouth. "Well," Chad said, drawing the word out, "look who's wearing the big boy badge now." Noah didn't respond. He kept his eyes on the paperwork, flipping through the last page of stock rotation. "You know what's funny?" Chad continued, pushing off the door and stepping closer. "All it took was one act of pity, one sob story, and some spilled groceries." Noah finally looked up, steady and quiet. "You done?" Chad scoffed. "Come on, man. Don't pretend like you earned this the same way the rest of us did. You'll always just be the guy who carried someone else's bags. You got pulled up because she felt sorry for you." There was no bite in Noah's voice when he answered. No anger, no defensiveness, just calm. "You're right," he said. Chad blinked, caught off guard. "I did carry her bags," Noah continued, "and I'd do it again. For her. For anyone." He closed the binder and stood, facing him squarely now. "That's the difference between us, Chad. You think helping someone makes you smaller. I think it makes you human." The words hung in the air, heavier than either of them expected. Chad's jaw tensed. "Whatever," he muttered, backing away like the room had gotten too hot. "Let's see how long it lasts." He turned and walked out, the door swinging behind him with a sharp click. Noah didn't move for a moment. Then he sat back down, reopened the binder, and got back to work. Because he knew exactly who he was. And for the first time, that was more than enough. The blazer fit better than he expected, navy blue, single-breasted, with a subtle pinstripe that Eleanor said made him look like someone who knew what they were doing. He still wasn't convinced of that, but it felt like armor all the same, new fabric stitched over old worries. Noah adjusted the sleeves as he walked through the school's front office, a brown paper bag tucked under one arm and a container of apple slices sealed tight in the side pocket. The receptionist looked up and smiled, recognizing him immediately. "Mr. West? She's already waiting?" He nodded, thanked her softly, and made his way down the hall. Every Friday, like clockwork. New job, new title, new expectations, but this stayed the same. He wasn't letting it go. No matter how many meetings filled his calendar, no matter how many staff schedules or inventory reports needed his signature, he carved out this 1 hour. Lily was sitting at the cafeteria table, legs swinging beneath the bench, her pigtails just slightly crooked. When she saw him, her whole face lit up. She stood, practically bouncing. "Daddy!" Noah grinned, heart easing in a way that no paycheck or promotion could ever match. "Hey, superstar," he said, setting the lunch down and pulling her into a hug. "How was the spelling test?" "I got all the bonus words," she beamed, "even invisible." He laughed. "Of course you did." They sat together, unwrapping sandwiches and sharing cookies like it was their own little ritual. Kids chattered around them, but to Noah the world narrowed to just the two of them. She looked at him mid-bite and said, "Your jacket makes you look like one of those rich dads on TV." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean the ones who forget their kid's birthday and yell into phones a lot?" She giggled. "No, the ones who wear ties, but you're better." He smiled, ruffling her hair gently. "I'm still me, kiddo." Lily nodded, serious now. "I know. You're just shinier." Later, as he walked back to the car, blazer slung over one shoulder and the cold air biting at his sleeves, he realized something. He didn't need to prove he hadn't changed. He'd just have to keep showing it, one Friday lunch at a time. The office lights were dimmed low, the city skyline glowing through the wide glass windows behind Eleanor's desk. Snow drifted past in lazy flakes, painting the view with a quiet stillness that didn't match the usual pulse of corporate life. Noah sat across from her, still in his blazer, the weight of the day's meetings pressing behind his eyes. It was late, past dinner, and the building had emptied out around them. Eleanor poured 2 cups of tea from a carafe, her movements slower than usual, like whatever she had to say was heavier than what she was used to carrying. "You ever hear the story of how Benton Holdings started?" she asked, sliding one of the mugs toward him. Noah shook his head. "My father owned a hardware store," she said. "Tiny place. We lived above it. My mother worked nights at a diner. We didn't have much, but we had enough. Until we didn't." She stared into her cup for a long moment. "He died when I was 14. Heart attack. No insurance. We lost the store 6 months later. I watched my mother pack up shelves that had been her whole life. We moved into a 1-bedroom apartment with no heat. She worked until her hands cracked." Noah didn't speak. He knew better than to interrupt silence like that. "I started Benton with a community grant, a folding table, and borrowed money. I was 23. Everyone laughed when I said I wanted to change grocery retail. I built everything you see from the ground up, not just for success, but to matter, to prove I wasn't invisible." She looked up at him then. Her voice softened. "But lately, I've realized the people who matter most aren't the ones standing on stages or headlining trade shows. They're the ones bagging groceries with tired feet, the ones helping strangers in the snow with no cameras watching." Her gaze held his. "People like you." Noah felt his throat tighten. He didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being the one someone like her looked at like that. "I thought I had to become someone to be seen," she said quietly. "But maybe being seen starts with choosing to see others first." Noah nodded, eyes glinting with something close to gratitude. "I think you already have." The ribbon fluttered slightly in the winter breeze, bright red against the silver storefront that gleamed like a promise. A crowd had gathered, employees, executives, local press. A banner hung high above the entrance, Benton Market, flagship location, grand reopening. Someone handed Noah a pair of ceremonial scissors, the handles glossy and oversized, almost cartoonish in his calloused hands. He shifted on his feet, tugging at the collar of the fresh-pressed blazer they'd insisted he wear. It fit better than his first one, tailored and clean. But it still felt strange, like it belonged to a man he hadn't fully grown into yet. Eleanor stood beside him, poised and confident as ever, though her smile was softer today, more human. "You ready?" she asked under her breath, so the microphones wouldn't catch it. Noah glanced at the crowd, at the rows of employees in matching uniforms who had spent the last 3 months renovating the space from the inside out. The store sparkled, new aisles, community-sourced produce, expanded programs for underprivileged families. It wasn't just a facelift, it was a second chance. He looked past the cameras and reporters toward the edge of the crowd where Lily stood with her coat zipped to her chin and her gloved hand wrapped around a thermos of hot cocoa. She waved, beaming, and he felt something inside him settle. "This isn't about me," he said. Eleanor nodded. "I know. That's why it's you." Noah took a slow breath and stepped up to the mic as someone gestured for quiet. He didn't have a speech prepared. "I used to shop here," he said simply. "I'd count coins at checkout, try to make dinner out of $5. I never thought I'd stand up here. I'm not a suit. I'm not a CEO. I'm just a dad trying to make the world a little easier for people like me, eh?" He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. The cameras flashed, but he ignored them. This store isn't reopening to show off. It's reopening to show up for the people who thought no one saw them. He turned, raised the scissors, and cut the ribbon. And just like that, the doors opened, not to fame, not to glory, but to something far more important, a future built on empathy and work, and the quiet belief that kindness still matters. It was after closing when Noah knocked on Eleanor's office door, a folder clutched tightly in his hand, corners creased from being opened and closed too many times. She looked up from her desk, eyes tired but attentive, the warm lamplight casting gold out across her papers. "You have a minute?" he asked, stepping in before he lost the nerve. "Always," she said, setting her pen down. "What's on your mind?" He handed her the folder. Inside were handwritten notes, scribbled outlines, rough drafts of ideas that had kept him up every night for weeks. There were testimonials from store-level staff, surveys from workers barely making rent, and a page titled "Hope" in the break room that made her pause longer than the rest. "I've been thinking," Noah said, his voice steady but low, "about everything you did for me, about all the people who never get that shot, the ones who don't speak the right way, don't wear the right clothes, but they show up, they carry everything." She flipped through the notes slowly, reading his words. "I want to build something," he continued, "not just for show, not for PR. A program that finds people like me, like I was, single parents, folks juggling 2 jobs, people who've never seen themselves as leaders, but could be, if someone just looked twice." He hesitated. "We train them. We teach them what no one ever taught me, finance, scheduling, management, but more than that, we teach them how to believe they belong, because that's the hardest part." Eleanor didn't speak for a long moment. When she did, her voice was quieter than he expected. "You wrote this all yourself?" He nodded, unsure if she was impressed or just being polite. She closed the folder slowly, thoughtfully, then looked at him, not as a subordinate, not as a charity case, but as an equal. "I see why Lily thinks you wear a cape." Noah chuckled under his breath, unsure what to say. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, eyes still on him. "Let's build it," she said, "together." And just like that, his idea became something more. Not just a plan, not just a folder, a beginning. The banquet hall shimmered with soft lighting, silverware glinting against linen-draped tables, murmurs of polite conversation weaving between courses. Benton Holdings' annual gala wasn't usually this emotional, but tonight felt different. The company had changed in the past year, and everyone knew it, not just in profit margins or polished branding, but in spirit. At the far end of the room, a modest stage stood beneath a string of golden lights. Eleanor had just finished her speech praising the company's evolution, the rollout of the mentorship program, and the quiet strength of leadership that starts with listening. Then she turned toward the crowd, her voice softer, more personal. "There's one more speaker," she said, "someone who reminded all of us what this year was truly about." Noah blinked, confused, until he saw Lily being gently guided toward the stage by a staff member. She clutched a folded piece of paper in her small hands, cheeks flushed pink from a mix of nerves and excitement. Her white dress was wrinkled from where she'd been sitting, and her shoes tapped nervously against the floor as she walked. Noah stood halfway, as if ready to stop her. Eleanor caught his eye and smiled. "It's okay," she mouthed. Lily stepped up to the podium. The room went quiet. She unfolded her paper slowly, holding it with both hands. "Hi," she said, her voice small but steady. "My name is Lily. I'm 8. I'm here because my daddy works here now. And because Miss Eleanor said I could say something." She paused, looking out at a sea of unfamiliar faces. Her eyes found Noah's, and that was all she needed. "My daddy used to work at night and come home really tired, but one day he helped someone in the snow. He didn't know she was the boss. He just helped because that's what he does." A breath caught somewhere in the room. "And now he helps everybody." She smiled. "He teaches people who were scared, like he was, and he makes them feel brave." Lily looked down at her paper, then back up. "I just wanted you to know he's my hero, and I think he's yours too." There was silence, then applause, loud, rising, genuine. But Noah didn't hear it. All he saw was his daughter standing under the lights, speaking truth with a courage he wasn't sure he'd ever earn. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. The air outside the store was sharp with winter again, the kind that turned breath into fog and made you pull your coat tighter without thinking. The same store, the same lot, even the same row of spaces near the entrance, but everything else had changed. Noah stepped outside, holding a box of donated canned goods under one arm, ready to load them into the back of a community outreach van. The sun had just started to dip, painting the sky in streaks of copper and gray. He paused when he heard the unmistakable sound, bags tearing, cans rolling, a quiet gasp muffled by the wind. About 15 feet away, a woman in a thick coat struggled to collect her fallen groceries. Her cart had tipped slightly against the curb, and one of her bags had ripped clean through. A head of lettuce rolled toward the asphalt, bouncing once before landing near the slush. Noah didn't hesitate. "Need a hand?" he asked, already moving toward her. She looked up, startled for a second, but then gave a sheepish nod. "That'd be great. I didn't realize the bag was so thin." He crouched down beside her, picking up a can of soup, then a box of cereal, carefully brushing the snow off the packaging. She held the bag open as he filled it again, her gloved fingers trembling slightly from the cold. "Thank you," she said once they stood, brushing a stray hair from her face. "I didn't expect most people just walk past." Noah smiled, simple and soft, just doing what anyone would. She gave him a curious look, like maybe she wanted to say more, but instead she just nodded and rolled her cart toward her car. He watched her for a moment, then turned back toward the van, the box of goods still balanced in his arms. Across the lot, the glowing sign of the store lit up as the streetlights flickered on. It was the same parking lot where everything had started. A chance moment, a simple gesture. one that had changed the course of his life. And now, without fanfare or applause, it came full circle. Not because he was trying to repay something, but because helping. That had always been the point.